Hello guys, I hope you're well. Thank you for joining me today. Right, today we're going to be taking a look at the Fuji 50-140 lens, the F2.8. Fantastic lens. Today I want to talk a little bit about the build quality side of things. Now I've owned this lens for 5 years. I've used it to shoot professional wedding photography as well as my landscape photography work as well. It's seen quite a few shoots. But I wanted to talk a bit about the build quality of this lens more than the optical performance. I think it's fair to say optically this lens is fantastic, probably one of my favourite Fuji lenses for the way the image is rendered and also the sharpness. So yeah, absolutely fantastic optically. And there's tons of reviews out there on YouTube about the optical performance of this lens, but I really want to concentrate on the build quality. It's fair to say that when you buy a new lens, you take a look at it and you think, fantastic, the build quality looks great, but you don't really know until you've used the lens for a long period of time whether it actually holds up. So I'm going to be talking about that today, and there's some interesting findings I think actually, and it might help you if you're thinking about picking one of these lenses up. I'm also here at this wonderful coastal photography location here in Pembrokeshire, and I'm hoping to capture a nice image of a wonderful rock formation that juts out of the sea known as Church Rock. So yes, I'm hoping to capture something today. Conditions are fairly overcast, but while we're setting up, I'll talk you through my thoughts on the build quality of this lens. So without further ado, let's see what we can find. Chillier than it looks this morning. So let's talk about the build quality of this lens. Like I mentioned before, optically it's absolutely fantastic. I've always enjoyed using this lens, but the build quality, you just don't really know what you're going to get, do you, until a bit further on down the line. So I just want to share my experience with you. So just to put this into context, because when you're talking about used gear, it all depends on how much you've used something during that time. So this has been with me to 98 wedding photography shoots. So it's been on a camera body all day for all of those pretty much 98 weddings. It's also shot 146 portrait shoots. During the portrait session, I always use this for probably about 50% of the portraits, you know, just get that nice shallow depth of field, which is fantastic. It's also been with me to around about approximately 300 landscape photography shoots. So that would be where I'm doing these videos out and about in the landscape, and the lens is crammed into my bag, maybe with some, you know, camping equipment and other bits and bobs. So you can say, I guess, over the course of that 5-year period, roughly about 600 shoots. And yeah, I guess so I've used it a fair bit, you could say. I hoped I wouldn't have any issues actually over 5 years with build quality, but let me just explain a few things to you. Here you can see like the mount, it wobbles significantly. There's obviously quite a lot of play here between the body and the lens mount, which I'm a little bit disappointed with. More than that though, I would say the autofocus has pretty much let me down now. So about 6 months ago, I took this out of my wedding photography bag and replaced it with a prime lens because it wasn't acquiring focus. It was become very, very sluggish, nowhere near the performance it was when I first had it. When I'm shooting landscapes, I often shoot in manual mode, so I'll switch over to manual, I use the AFL button to acquire focus, it locks the focus on the subject, and then quite often it drifts out of focus. Quite often to to be completely blurred, so I'm continually having to recheck my focus all the time. So the autofocus side of things on this lens is almost unusable now, and it's been a slow diminishing process actually. It's not something that's just happened straight away. It seems to have got worse over a period of time, so I'm really disappointed about that. I guess it all depends on how you look at it. You might say to yourself, well actually, you know, you've used it for over 600 shoots, you've probably more than got your money's worth out of, you know, this lens, and you're probably right, but I think for a flagship red badge lens aimed at more of the professional market, I would expect to get a little longer than 5 years out of a lens. Now, this lens costs around about £1,200 here in the UK, and I guess if you compare that to say the Canon RF, which is £2,700, you could get two of these for that price and still have some change. So yeah, I guess you could weigh it up that way. So other things to think about as well is this zoom ring here. The rubber on it has started to deteriorate, I think. Now the focus ring is metal and that's absolutely fine, but the zoom ring is not. So that's quite disappointing. I think if they'd have put a metal zoom ring on there as well, that would have added to the longevity of this lens. But yeah, quite disappointing. I think the biggest thing, apart from the autofocus, is the amount of play I've got here between the lens and the body. I think that's very disappointing. So they're my thoughts just on the build quality of this lens, how it stood up to professional use over the course of the last 5 years. I hope you got something that you can take away from that, maybe if you're thinking about using it for something similar. I think if you're just using it for the occasional use, like the odd portrait shoot, maybe the odd landscape photography shoot, that type of thing, I'm sure it'll be absolutely fine. I guess it's just the amount that I've used this lens, but like I mentioned, I would have hoped to have got longer out of it. So would I purchase this lens again? I've got 4 years of use out of it for £1,200, possibly. But actually, I've been using the 85mm f1.8 prime lens from Viltrox, which is actually quite a cheap lens, and I've just been using that for my portraits, and I've been getting very, very nice results out of that. So I'm going to continue with that for maybe another year or so, and then I will make a decision based on what work I've got coming up in the future. So yeah, they're my thoughts. Hope you got something you can take away there. But while we're here, I'm going to take this shot of this amazing rock formation. Like I mentioned before, clouds are quite overcast, so it's going to be a very minimalist shot. I think I'm going to be shooting this in portrait mode, so I'm just going to switch over to portrait mode. It might even be a square crop, or maybe a 4x5, but we'll see when I get it composed. This wind is biting, it is, it really is. I didn't realise it was quite going to be so cold as it is this morning. But anyway, we have everything set up. We are at 140mm, focus on the rock there, zoomed in as much as we can. I've got a 10 stop and a 3 stop filter on the front of the camera there, and that's allowing us to get a 60-second exposure, meaning we can smooth the water out completely to create a very minimal shot. And it definitely suits a square crop, I think. Something very, very simple, just really focusing on the wonderful formation that we've got in this rock. It's quite striking. So actually this rock formation, depending on where you're situated on the beach, looks completely different. Once you go down to the, the eastern end of the beach there, it looks completely different. It looks more like a church, hence its name, Church Rock. But I like this angle. I think this is a very interesting angle of it. 2-second timer on, focusing on the rock, and I'm going to just stand around this side of the camera while I take the exposure, just to make sure the wind doesn't shake or protect the camera from the wind a little bit. So that's it for this week's video, guys. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you got a few takeaways from my thoughts on the build quality of this lens, should you be thinking about picking one up. I do hope you enjoy this image. After my image, I'll be showing the 10 challenge winners from the Photographers Clubhouse challenge, the monthly challenge from February, which was minimalist shots. So I'll put the 10 challenge winners up there after this one. But until next time, guys, take care. I will see you soon. And yeah, enjoy your photography.